Inauguration Day, January 20th. Watch it with us. Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, and Jeremy Boring. Live from D.C., Donald Trump's historic second term officially begins. Coverage starts at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Watch live on DailyWire Plus.
Trump's Defense Department nominee, Pete Hegseth, appeared before the Senate Armed Services Committee this week, where female Democrat senators tried to force him to declare that women are fit for combat duty by becoming hysterical and shaking their tiny fists at him, a man who could crush their skulls between the fingers of a single hand. Women Democrat senators like Kirsten Gillibrand, Mazie Hirono, and Tim Kaine tried to hammer Hegseth with the mightiest power females have, the power to bully men into lying about women's capabilities in the hopes it will buy them a few minutes of peace. But the senators' attacks were dampened by the fact that they were leftists. Because they're women, they lack the capacity for reason. The onslaught by the female Democrats was reminiscent of the playground scene from Alfred Hitchcock's horror film The Birds, in which legions of crows and seagulls and other shrill, cawing, vacant-eyed creatures slowly gather on the telephone lines in what at first seems an innocent natural phenomenon, but eventually reveals itself to be the prelude to an uncanny assault on humanity itself, with the birds making up for what they lack in logical thought with the sharpness of their talons and a relentlessness that could drive a man almost to madness amidst the cacophony of wild, screeching cries from their high-pitched, rage-infused voices. Except instead of birds, it was Democrat women, which in some ways was even worse because they didn't even have the mercy to peck out Hegseth's eyes so he wouldn't have to look at them while they tried to rip him to pieces because he refused to lie about women in combat. Kirsten Gillibrand, for instance, demanded that Hegseth answer two questions. One, do you think women can play an essential role in combat? And two, do you think this dress makes me look fat? Hegseth tried to split the difference by saying the dress was very appealing, but women would disappear in combat like a faint pencil smudge under the force of an industrial-strength eraser. But Senator Gillibrand would not be satisfied until Hegseth showed himself willing to shower her with flattering deceit so she could continue to live in a dream world of feminine strength and competence rather than in reality where she just feels so insecure and down on herself all the time. Mazie Hirono demanded that Hegseth promise he would give up alcohol, women, nights out on the town with his friends, and any hobbies that would distract him from her needs and desires. Hegseth, however, refused, saying he'd only met Hirono 10 minutes ago and wasn't yet willing to make that big a commitment. And Tim Kaine asked Hegseth if it was true that he had had an affair with a woman, and if so, what was that like, and were women's bodies really as soft as they looked, and why did they give him such a funny tingly feeling in his no-no places? The obsession with feminizing combat units while the Chinese marshal their forces for war is part of a new Democrat strategy forming in the wake of Donald Trump's victory over what's-her-name in the presidential election. Whereas the old Democrats hope to overthrow the immutable nature of reality with lunatic academic theories forced on the nation by censorious social structures meant to silence dissent, the new Reformed Democrat Party has taken stock of its weaknesses and failed policies and now hopes to overthrow the immutable nature of reality with lunatic academic theories forced on the nation by censorious social structures meant to silence dissent. So, for instance, in California, Democrats made sure the fire department was stocked with women and that water policy was based on environmentalism. Then when Los Angeles burned to the ground while fat lesbian firefighters, all named Kristen for some reason, ran in helpless hysteria from one empty fire hydrant to another, Democrats sought to stifle criticism by having the mainstream news media write such headlines as "Homophobes make politics out of fire victims' suffering." This same strategy should work really well when the Chinese invade New York and are met by combat units indistinguishable from the Rockettes. The New York Times headline could read something like, "Hung Sao Chi Kwa Su Lai Chu." So Godspeed, Pete. Deus Volt. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. All right, we are back laughing our way to the end of our long national nightmare. Monday, history will be made. The Daily Wire will be live from D.C. as Donald Trump takes the oath of office. Watch it all live and celebrate the 47th president with 47% off your membership. Use code 47 at dailywire.com/subscribe and join us live. All right. Also, you want to leave a comment, of course. wherever you get the show, whether you get it on the street from some guy in a raincoat or just, pick it up out of the gutter, watch it on YouTube or on DailyWire Plus, which is really where you should watch it. Leave a comment. And if the comment just defies any sense of decency or, right thinking as low and just it kind of degrades the audience entirely, we'll read it on the show because that's what we're here to do. Today's comment is from Endless Undone Projects. I know the feeling. It says, when the right realizes the true Alpha Andrew is Klavan with no E's, we will be unstoppable. Absolutely. That is probably a reference, I would say, to Andrew Tate, who we'll be talking about a little later. But right now, let's get to today's episode, Trump's War for Reality. One of the things that is a little bit trying about doing this show is that I can't always talk immediately about what I want to talk about. Today, for instance, I really want to talk about Nosferatu, a really fascinating new horror movie that says a lot about where we are in this cultural moment. But before that, I do that, we have to get to that cultural moment. We have to talk about history. And the news kind of sets the agenda. I mean, I'd like to spend the whole show also celebrating the fact that Trump is coming, just play the Trump happiness montage over and over again. But that would be wrong. I think we really have to put the Trump happiness montage away, finally. We've played it a lot, I know, but we're going to stop playing it and just really get down to the reality of things. And I think we have to talk about war. We have to talk about real military war and the war between the sexes and the war against reality, which the Democrats have been waging for the last 50 years. I've talked about that a lot, the war against reality. And now I hope we're going to have, as the title suggests, Trump's war for reality. But before that, I was listening to Biden's farewell speech about preserving American values. In a way, I actually thought it was kind of reminiscent of George Washington's famous farewell speech, and that, like George Washington, Biden passed away several years ago. But aside from that, I was kind of mesmerized by the complete dishonesty of it, the complete just one lie after another, so many lies that you couldn't really enumerate them. You were just looking at a man talking about American values who had opened our borders, which is against the law. He's supposed to maintain our borders. He'd corrupted our legal system, hunted down parents and Catholics, weakened our military, butchered and sexualized our children, made money off influence peddling, as he's been doing his whole life, strangled both Ukraine and Israelis' attempts to defend themselves while pouring all our money into their country. So actually acting against both himself and the taxpayer. He sold out our troops in Afghanistan, instituted a truly harmful Green New Deal by lying about it and calling it the Inflation Reduction Act. And now in his speech, he's kind of pretending. He says, we haven't felt all the effect of our policies yet, but boy, oh boy, great times are coming. I thought if we haven't felt them yet, it's like I'm waiting for the walls to come collapsing in. And then famously, this was the part that everybody quoted. This is cut two.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. The dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy. Just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to.
It's such a lot. I mean, first, I won't go into the robber barons. They helped build this country, and most trust busting is government finagling and graft. Essentially, there's some trusts that need to be busted, but most of it is just graft. Also, people who made less money voted for Trump. People who made more money voted for Biden. Biden had something like twice as many billionaire donors, and all the richest districts in the country went to Biden, not to Trump. This is maybe the biggest lie of government aid of the welfare state, is the welfare state guts the middle class and leaves two opposing classes. In capitalism, you have a stairway, and you can rise up that stairway. It's mobile, but everything freezes under socialism because they're not going to tax the rich because the rich will leave, right? That's why they built the Berlin Wall, to keep them in, but ultimately they run out of money too. You run out of other people's money, as Margaret Thatcher famously said, and the poor remain poor. So you have the poor and you have the powerful. You have the powerful drinking in all their privilege, and then you have the poor who are supposed to be happy because everybody's equal, but nobody is happy at all. So now here comes Trump, and my biggest hopes for him: bring back our military in time to defend us in war, completely dump the green policies so we have good energy policies, cut back the deep state, and gut the Obama appointees who've been woven into the CIA and the FBI and the DOJ, and they're persecuting Americans instead of persecuting criminals and our enemies. So he's going to make a speech, obviously, his inaugural speech, and a lot of people are telling him what he should say. I think what he says should sound something like this.
We're going to win so much. We're going to win at every level. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We're going to win economically. We're going to win with the economy. We're going to win with military. We're going to win with healthcare and for our veterans. We're going to win with every single facet.
Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay. My, oh my, what a wonderful day.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. You'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and gay.
We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Did you know that American homeowners have over $32 trillion in equity? I didn't know that, but you know who does? Criminals know it. Criminals are targeting that money with a growing scam the FBI calls house stealing. This scam allows criminals to transfer your title out of your name using a one-page document they file at the county. Then they can take out loans against it or even sell it behind your back. And the most concerning part, you won't find out about it until collection or foreclosure notices start arriving in your mailbox, leaving you with a financial and legal nightmare. The best way to protect your equity is with Home Title Lock's exclusive $1 million triple lock protection. This service offers 24/7 monitoring, urgent alerts, and if fraud should occur, their U.S.-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title. So, when was the last time you checked on your title? If you're like me, the answer is never, and that's exactly what scammers are counting on. The good news is we've partnered with Home Title Lock to offer you all 25% off their services. Go to HomeTitleLock.com, use my promo code Klavan25 to save 25%, and you'll also get a free title history report to ensure you're not already a victim. And make sure you check out the $1 million triple lock protection details when you get there. The link below, that's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code Klavan25. All right, Chapter 1, Girls at War. Someone messed with that happiness montage. I'm not. Was that Danny? Our ex-producer Danny X is here, and he may have been messing around with the happiness montage. I'm not sure what happened there, but we're not going to play it anymore, so it doesn't matter. Last week, I gave you tomorrow's news today. I want to talk about the lies and what I'm hoping will be this new war for truth, and where we begin and what we're lying about. I gave you tomorrow's news today. I told you that after the conservatives hammered California for the official malfeasance that caused the city of LA to burn down or helped, assisted the fire and letting it burn down, I told you that we were going to get comments exactly like this one from Governor Newsom, that we can't criticize this because people are suffering. This is cut 3.
I'm not interested in politicizing an event like this. I don't like the banality of it. I don't like the inhumanity of that. I would like people to focus on a collaboration between the executive in Washington, D.C. and in the state of California to help rebuild a community that's been completely ravaged.
So this is hilarious coming from the clowns who basically blamed George W. Bush for Hurricane Katrina as if Bush had sat in the Oval Office going until the winds, like a chaos theory, the winds finally got so strong they blew away all the black people. Remember, there's Kanye West. George W. Bush doesn't like black people. And every time there's a shooting, they stand on the bodies to make speeches about how conservatives are to blame or guns are to blame, and they want to seize all our guns. But now they want to pretend that this is just unavoidable. One article I saw was called "LA was built to burn." It's the mountains and the winds and the this, and that's who climate change has moved all this. But let me put this to you from another perspective, because I want to talk about something else. What if before the fires, or let's say Donald Trump had come over and said, hey, wait a minute, 4 years ago, the voters approved $7.5 billion in water money It was a vote. It was a huge vote. It was like 67% in favor of it. $2.7 billion was set aside for additional water storage, more reservoirs. And most voters thought that there would be new dams and projects to replenish the groundwater basins and all this. $4.8 billion was earmarked for regional projects, recycling and all this stuff. 86% of that money has been appropriated, so the government has it, but only 14% has been spent. And none of these things has happened. No new water storage. So what if I told you that before the fires? And what if I said, oh, the fire, but don't worry, the fire chief is making sure there are more women firefighters. What would you have said? You would have said, taxi, take me out of California because this city is going to burn to the ground. You would have known it was going to happen. Well, that is exactly what I felt like watching Pete Hegseth and Kirsten Gillibrand. Maybe we should just ban women named Kristen and Kirsten. Maybe that's the problem. But this is the questioning this guy gets when he wants to be the head of the State Department. By the way, it made a great showing of himself, really was articulate, knowledgeable, understanding, knew where the issues were. And this is what Kirsten Gillibrand said to him.
Everything you've said in these public statements is politics. I don't want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal. I mean, you're basically saying women, after they have children, can't ever serve in the military in a combat role. It's a silly thing to say. It's a silly thing to say, beneath the position that you are aspiring to. To denigrate LGBTQ service members is a mistake. If you are a sharpshooter, you're as lethal regardless of what your gender identity is, regardless of who you love. So please know this to be a true statement. So you say it was a political thing. You say it undermined us, social engineering. I don't know why someone having to publicly say or not publicly say who they love is social engineering.
So you can see that Hegseth is just stoicizing his way through this. He's absolutely silent. So what we did is we had the Daily Wire send a film crew into his brain, and these were the thoughts we recorded as Cut 5.
Observe my hands, my dear. I could tear you to pieces with them.
I couldn't help myself. Now, no mother should be in a combat zone. That's a violation of everything we know to be sacred and important. I mean, what are we fighting for if not to keep mothers safe so they can do the one job that actually matters, making life, fashioning souls and all that stuff. But more urgently than that, what if I told you this? What if I told you the Secretary General of NATO says that war is coming and we're not prepared, and the RAND Corporation says the U.S. defense strategy and posture have become insolvent. The tasks that the nation expects its military forces and other elements of national power to do internationally exceed the means that are available to accomplish those tasks. Our defense strategy is based on the assumption we'll only have to fight one war at a time, when it's more likely that China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea could team up on us and become the new evil axis. What if I told you that China's shipbuilding industry, this is an amazing stat, has a capacity more than 230 times greater than that of the U.S. They are building a massive navy. They're moving in on our ports. They're moving in on our borders. They're building gigantic amphibious landing craft so they can invade Taiwan. They have a powerful new microwave weapon that has the intensity of a nuclear explosion and can destroy electronic components on our weapon systems. And of course, they have TikTok to destroy our society. And I told you that that's what Kirsten Gillibrand is saying. Why can't mommies and gay people be in the combat troops? That's what she's worried about. So that list that I gave you, most of that comes from, guess where? The New York Times, a former newspaper, on Knucklehead Row, where David Brooks puts forward that list and then attacks Hegseth for his obsession with wokeness in the military. Well, that's just a lie. It is just a lie. Hegseth is obsessed with lethality and making sure the men who have to go in and kill the people who are trying to kill us are well supported by the brass, which is now overblown and completely full of fat and full of people who haven't won a war since I think it was 1812. So we've lied about who men and women are and what they can do and what they should do. And we've lied about what government is and what it can do. And at the heart of this fantasy world we've been in is a lack of understanding of what evil is, of what the threats are and how prevalent those threats are, and why it doesn't matter if there are enough women in the military. It only matters if there are enough men who can kill people while carrying the kind of like 125-pound packs they have to carry when they're in full battle rattle. The biggest thing that the left leaves out is genuine evil. It's universality, right? And it's nature. the way it permeates everything. It's not just, Donald Trump is Hitler. It's not Hitler at all. It is a force that all of us are susceptible to, which brings me, by the way, to the Gaza deal. Ronald Reagan designated January Sanctity of Human Life Month. It breaks my heart that since Roe v. Wade, we've lost over 66 million precious lives to abortion. And even though Roe was overturned, there's an even bigger challenge now. Abortion pills are making it easier than ever, accounting for more than 60% of all abortions. Here's something amazing, though. PreBorn is making a real difference. They've helped save over 300,000 babies, and they're saving about 200 more every single day. If you want to know why, it's because when a mom gets to see her baby on ultrasound and hear that heartbeat, she's twice as likely to choose life. Every day, PreBorn provides free ultrasounds for mothers and their babies. Here's where you come in. For just $28, about what you spend on dinner out, you can help provide a free ultrasound to a mom in need. I love this part. Every single dollar goes directly to saving babies' lives. This Sanctity of Life Month, you can make a difference. If you're ready to help, it's super easy. Just dial pound 250, pound 250, and say baby. Or visit preborn.com/Klavan. That's pound 250, say baby, or go to preborn.com/KLAVAN. Together, we can help the smallest and most innocent among us get a chance at life. Chapter 2, Did the Jews Lose? Now, right now, once again, for some reason, the Jew haters are after me on X, which I'm very sad when I make them angry because I know that they're just like the transgender people. You know, when you're living a lie, you get very sensitive to the truth. It sets you off. And so they're mad at me. But I was watching this ceasefire deal, and I think they're voting on this today in Israel, whether to ratify this ceasefire deal, which was... the whole thing kind of reminds me of when Jimmy Carter, the last really bad president, gave way to Reagan and the Iranian hostages were released. And that's, I think, what they're kind of going for. What I think Trump is going for here. Biden is claiming credit. John Bolton, who has been driven insane, he has Trump derangement syndrome, says, oh, yeah, this is because the presidency of Biden is ending and they want to make sure they're dealing with Joe Biden. We all know why they're making a deal now. It's because Trump said he would kill every single one of them, possibly himself, possibly barehanded, if they didn't return the hostages. Now, I'm going to hold off on my opinion about this Gaza deal. I'm going to tell you what I think right now, which is that I think it sucks, but I think that its suckiness may be mitigated as time goes on. So I don't want to go over the top. So basically, they're saying they will free in the first phase 33 of the 94 remaining hostages, dead or alive. Thanks very much. And that will be in the first phase. And hopefully there are 7 Americans still in there, so we hope they'll be part of them. Then the Israelis are going to release close to 1,000 Palestinian terrorists, some of them who were going to be in jail for life. And they do this all the time. And of course, what do you think these guys do? You know, they don't come out and say, oh, we've learned our lesson, we're going to go back and act peacefully. They go back and start killing people again. So they're just increasing the chance there'll be another October 7th. And then Israel is going to withdraw from most of Gaza at first, and go back to the buffer zones. And that's, again, most hostage releases do not have these kind of these kind of conditions. Israel is giving up a lot, and it's why Netanyahu is under fire from the right in his country for giving up too much. And Hamas says it's going to do certain things. It's going to give up its demand that Israel agree to a permanent end to the war, which is what they were looking for. They were looking for a permanent ceasefire, but obviously that's not going to happen. And that's what Biden was looking for. Biden was looking for complete withdrawal for the Israelis because he has just been awful, and he's all behind the scenes, but it's been awful. He keeps talking about Israel's right to exist and their right to defend themselves, but they don't have a right to exist and defend themselves. They have the same right that every other country has, which is to strike back against those who attack them and wipe them off the face of the earth. I mean, you cannot live next to a genocidal terrorist group. There's nothing genocidal about Israel. If Hamas puts its guns down, if all of Iran's proxies put their guns down, the fighting stops. If Israel puts their guns down, Israel stops. That's just the truth. There's only one group of genocide folks in this area, and it's not the Jews. So the reason I'm keeping my powder dry instead of like shaking my fist, oh, this is, because Trump signed off on this. And obviously it wouldn't have happened without Trump. And Trump says it's an epic deal and all that stuff. And it's not. It's a bad deal. But what I think that they're basically counting on is, look, Hamas are a bunch of lying scum. They're just the worst. They're the scum of the earth. And they're not going to return more hostages. They're not going to meet. They almost blew the deal just 2 days ago. So they're not going to stick to their word, which means that Israel will still have a chance to go back in and fight, and wipe them out, which is what should happen. But the difference is that instead of having Joe Biden mouthing support while pressuring them to get out, he'll now have Donald Trump giving them support and pressuring them to kill every person in Hamas they can see. And I think that, Trump would have been ripped to shreds by everybody, I think, if he had scotched the deal and not gotten these 33 people out. I mean, that's what everybody wants. And this would never have happened, obviously, if Biden had said the only words that made sense after October 7th was give back our hostages, you sons of bitches, or we are going to give Israel every weapon we have. We're going to give them switchblades. We're going to give them mace. We're going to give them those little stars that people throw in kung fu movies. We are going to let them come in here and rip you apart. And I don't care who protests, and I don't care what the UN says, and I don't care how many pictures of crying Palestinian babies are on there. We are going to let them kill you until those hostages come back. That is the only thing that they should have said. And if they had, this would have been over a long time ago. I trust Trump to stand with Netanyahu. He always has. I trust him to stand with Israel. But the reason it got this far is because there are people in this country who support Hamas, okay? And we're talking about evil. We're talking about not recognizing evil when you see it. And I've said this before, but I think I have to say it again. It has to do with ideology. Ideology makes the evil sound good. This is what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said. So these guys have this, on the left, they have this intersectional idea that the person with the least power is always in the right. And that, of course, is untrue. First of all, there's no magical formula for knowing who has power or not. People have all different kinds of power. You can say, well, men have all the power, but if you've ever been in a room when a beautiful woman walks in, you know that men can have their power stripped away magically in moments and suddenly just become the kind of panting slaves after this girl. I've actually witnessed that in business when women come in and use the fact that they're women simply to take over a room. Power is, it's hard to describe, it's hard to define, it's hard to know where it is. So Iran is evil. That's what you have to know. You have to know that Iran is evil, and the intersectionality ideology is this lie that obscures the evil from us. And we have it on the right too. These guys who are always attacking me they get so sad that when I tell them that I think that anti-Semitism is actually anti-Christianity. I think the only Jew they really hate is Jesus. And I've proved this in an essay. I've shown you the German philosophers who say, guys like Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, who say the problem is Christianity, this Jewish idea seeped its way into our native culture, and we have to get rid of it. And that's just a generation or two before Hitler's rise. So, these guys, I always say this, that anti-Semitism is the devil's flagpole, that wherever it is, that's where the evil is. And the reason that's where the evil is because it's really anti-God. It's not anti-Jews, it's anti-God. And you can just tell by the kind of insane logic. They'll say, ha, 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 you've been kicked out of over 100 countries, Jews. That makes you bad people. And you think like, wait a minute, you persecute these people and it's their fault. And then you say, oh, and they spit on Christians, so they persecute you, and that's their fault too. So everything is their fault. They bombed Nagasaki because they were Catholics. They are just insane stuff. And, these are people who say America first, and then they support the Iranians who say death to America, just like they say Christ is king, and then they support the rape and murder of Christ's brother and sisters Jews. So it's this ideology that obscures this. Now, here's the thing. I want to say this about Christianity for a minute, just for a second. It really disturbs me a lot of times when you make a remark about Christianity. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a pastor. I'm a guy who loves Jesus, who talks about my relationship with Christ. That's all I am. And I immediately, instantaneously get these letters. No, you said this, and the truth is that, and I know this. And I just think like, you don't know anything. you don't know anything. You know how I know you don't know anything? Because nobody knows anything. Nobody's seen God. We're all feeling our way. We have a book. It guides us. It's great. But all of that theology, Jesus is way, way, way bigger than theology. The theology, the rules say you stone an adulteress. Now, Jesus, how does he know not to do that? How does he just not erase the rule, but he doesn't let it happen? It's because a healthy human being full of God knows evil when he sees it. He knows that the law says the absolute rule is that you can't do any work on the Sabbath, but he says, you can do, the Sabbath is made for you. You're not made for the Sabbath. You don't get dominated by the rules. You are an instrument of God. You are an instrument made to understand the difference between good and evil. So when you see Hamas bragging about the people they and killed, and you see Israel going out of their way to keep as many civilians safe, even though those civilians cheered for the and murders, you should know which side you're on. You should just know. There's no philosophy that can overcome that evil. You can't understand evil if you don't know what good is. You can't understand what good is if you don't know who God is and if you don't recognize God inside yourself. We have been stripped of our identities, and that's what I want to look at next. Chapter 3, Man, Oh Man. So let's talk about evil and men and women, okay? You remember about, I don't know how many years ago, it was quite a long time ago, Ben Shapiro, I think it was one of the Marches for Life, and Ben Shapiro was on the rise, and whatever he said, of course, the media would make a fuss about. It was bad, it was evil. And he was asked if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler. Would you kill baby Hitler? And Ben said, no, you don't kill an innocent baby. What I would do is I would take Hitler out of his family where he was an abused child and hopefully put him in a situation where he could be raised and not become evil Hitler, right? And they just were screaming, he wouldn't, he wants there to be a Hitler, he supports Hitler and all this. Absolutely unfair. He was 100% right. Because people become evil by choosing evil, right? Evil is a force. It is a force like the air. It's around us. It's in us. Solzhenitsyn said the line between good and evil runs right through every human heart, which means that people can go in one direction or another. And yes, the devil gets into us through our broken places. There's when you're abused, when you're desperate, when you are sick or mentally ill, it's much, much easier for that little voice in your head that says, oh, if you go this way, it's going to comfort you or make you stronger. If you hate Jews, that's going to make you a strong guy. You get to go on X and say, oh, I don't like Jews. And that makes you a really tough, cool guy. And that's going to make you, and of course, even as you're doing that, you become this kind of twisted, guy like the Gollum in Lord of the Rings. You get shrunken down to nothing, even as you're saying, oh, I'm so tough because I hate people. A healthy society has strong social structures against doing evil. You know what evil looks like. And a lot of those have to do with the relationships between men and women. So when a woman is a slut, she cheapens all the other women. It's not just herself she cheapens because she makes it difficult for them to live with self-respect unless they have the character to do it. Obviously, you can do it. You can choose to do it. But if you're in a slut culture, it becomes much harder to do that because a lot of the available men are going off where things are easy and when they have no responsibilities. That's why if you read, old novels like Tom Jones, for instance, when a woman in the novel Tom Jones gets pregnant out of wedlock, the other women beat her up. It's not the men saying you're a slut, it's the other women because she cheapens them. She makes them more vulnerable. So in a healthy society, women who are sluts get shamed. They are made to feel ashamed by the society around them. People say, you are less than you should be because of the way you behave. They don't have shows like where you come on and talk about how many men, what your body count is, and they giggle at you and sort of make nasty remarks. But meanwhile, they got a camera focused on your cleavage. They don't do that. They actually make you feel ashamed. If you're a man, and I lived in this society, so I know, and you take a woman out and she gets drunk, you don't press your advantage on her. It's just not right. You just don't do it. You take her home because she's not she's not ready to make any decisions about what she should do with you or your life. You don't use her for your pleasure just because you happen to get her drunk. Getting a woman drunk was shameful, and other men would shame you for it because it made them look bad. Those systems become a social network. That is the kind of social constraint that a healthy society has, and we haven't had really since the 1960s, increasingly less since the 1960s, although I sense it coming back a little bit. Those systems make us feel constrained because we feel society is holding us back. And so women feel like, I feel ashamed. So instead of stopping being a slut, which would be the smart thing to do, I'm gonna fight society, and that's gonna make me a rebel. We were talking about this before, that C.S. Lewis comment about when we were talking about Wicked, the C.S. Lewis comment that women are taught by the evil people, they're taught to rebel, that rebellion itself is a good thing. And we understand that nobody likes to be constrained by society or by anything else. And so we understand why women are taught to rebel, and then they degrade themselves. And the same thing happens with men. And men always feel the constraints of society more because men have a lot of rebellion in them and a lot of energy, and they want to go and do something. They got to do it now. They want what they want now. That's the way men are. They're aggressive. They're very active, and they feel the constraints of society. And it's much easier to teach men to break those rules. And that's why we have the situation where women are supposed to do anything they want, but men are yelled at for taking advantage of that, which is absurd, right? So people get angry. They get angry, right? And when you have a screechy creature like Kirsten Gillibrand cawing like a crow in your ear about a mother's right to be killed in combat while you're trying to restore the military so that she's not carried off by the Chinese and, put in their bat dish, I don't blame you for having a fantasy of hurling her into a room with Andrew Tate and locking the door. We all have fantasies like that. When your boss makes you work late, you have a fantasy of strangling the guy. I understand why people look at Andrew Tate and he says, that's why they giggle when he says things like this. And play cut 8. This is Andrew Tate.
Perfected this in pimp school. When I got my PhD, we had to practice if a girl comes at you, you cheater, you're cheating. It's bang out the machete, boom in her face, and then grip her up by the neck. Her panties get wet. The machete's on the floor, her panties are all wet. You her. That's how it goes. Slap, slap, grab, choke, shut up, sex. These are the basic moves of pimping.
I'm sure they are. Obviously, that's evil. You know that. You are built to know it. You have the image of God inside you. You are built to know evil when you see it. You're built to know good when you see it. And you know that men and women are one flesh. One side of them can't get degraded without the other side being degraded. And there was a really bad moment on Benny Johnson's show. Johnson had Tate on and compared the legal cases against Tate, which were dropped because the police apparently had done some systematic things, illegal technicalities. It was dropped. But he had been bragging about pimping women and using them to make money through and all this stuff. And Benny Johnson brings him on and introduces him like he's a victim in the same way Trump is, because Trump really was a victim of lawfare. This is what he said, cut 6.
You know so very much about this, but whether it be you or Marine Le Pen in France or Bolsonaro in Brazil or President Trump here in America, there seems to be a global fight against the freedom movement, against populism and against free speech and free thinkers. You yourself have been a victim of this, and so I want to just set the table for you to sound off on your take, President Trump being sentenced today.
Yeah, that was a foregone conclusion. Anyone who believed that jury selection had anything to do with the decision that they were going to come up with for President Trump is extremely childish.
Now, anybody who brings this guy who's on video beating a woman with a belt and then goes on and says, the women, they love it. Using we all have dark sides of our personality, using dark sides of women's sexuality to abuse them in. Now, I don't know anything about Benny Johnson. I got to be honest with you. I've never heard him before. I've heard that he was involved in that Russian scam. I don't blame anybody for that. They seem to have been scammed, but I don't know anything about him. So I have nothing. I do know one thing. I know he has a wife and 3 children. I don't think he's treating his wife like that. I don't think he's following Andrew Tate's rules for treating women by doing that to his wife. I suspect he's probably at home a perfectly decent human being. So why is he bringing this woman on? And then he brings on Trump's attorney, Alina Habba. Now, Gorko always gave me a hard time for making the joke. I called her, because she's pretty, I called her Alina Habba, and he said that was disrespectful. I don't know. Here she comes on, and this is what she says to take.
Nice to meet you. I'm a big fan.
Well, nice
Big
to meet
fan.
you. I'm a fan. You're the one saving Trump. You're doing more important work than me.
America, not just Trump. And I agree with everything you just said. And I think that your anger is the same that President Trump has for our country. And the time is now for us to stop being wimps. I think that's exactly the right sentiment. And I also have to say that I sympathize with you, because I think you go through a lot of the same show me the person, I'll find the crime that President Trump has gone through.
So you got me. I'm baffled. I have no idea what the hell she's doing that for, why she's talking to that guy. Maybe she hasn't seen the pictures of him belt strapping a woman, or heard him talk about how you strangle them and choke them before them, and then you can turn them into hookers. I don't know. Maybe she hasn't seen that stuff. But the point that I'm trying to make is, inside us is a moral compass. You are born with it. We are born knowing who we are. You know, it's funny. Matt Walsh made that film, What is a Woman? And he walked around and we all made fun of the people who couldn't answer the question. But the film itself can't answer the question. And I talked about this a little bit at the time, that, you know, the reason the question is hard to answer is, first, because we have this ideology that has replaced our inability to answer it. And the ideology is nonsense. But you end up saying things about women's anatomy, or, you know, chromosomes and all that stuff. But there's an idea that is called primary intelligibles. This is an idea from a Muslim philosopher back in the 11th century, a guy who affected, you know, Thomas Aquinas and other great Christian thinkers. It was called primary intelligibles, which are things we just know. We know what a woman is. A child who's being questioned by the police, they'll bring in a woman police officer. Why? Because the child knows instinctively that women are there to take care of him. That's why. I was walking down the street once in Berkeley, California at night. It was in the dark of night, and I was walking home, and a woman came up behind me and grabbed me by the arm and said, "Would you help me? A man is following me. Would you walk me home?" And I, of course, said, "Absolutely not. I could get killed." No, I didn't. Of course, I took her home. She knew what I was there for. She knows what I'm there for. And she knew her odds of getting a good guy like me who would stand up for her were very high, you know, because guys mostly are, you know, most people are good. The war on reality is a war on your nature. It has been a war on your nature. You have a nature. You have the spirit of the image of God inside you. You know the difference. You know why women are here. You know what men are. You don't have to be able to express it. You don't have to let somebody else express it for you. And we've let that become, that knowledge be replaced by these ideologies. And I don't care, you know, if you're Catholic or Protestant or anything, Jewish, whatever else you are, your theology is not going to save you if you lose that image of God inside you. And now, finally, I can get to what I really want to talk about, which is Nosferatu, which deals with many of the issues I've been talking about and many of the issues we're going to deal with as we try to take reality, which is the reality of ourselves, back. Final chapter, Nosferatu. And since we're going to be talking about the movies, let me just take a quick moment to mourn the death of David Lynch, really innovative filmmaker, made Blue Velvet and, of course, the Twin Peaks television show, and just a lot of really innovative films. One of my closest friends from Hollywood worked with him when he was starting out. He has some kind of producer credit on Mulholland Drive, and says he was just one of the nicest men around and just a really innovative filmmaker, really interesting. But let's talk about Nosferatu. It's a big hit horror movie, a remake of an old silent movie. It was made in 1922 by the director F.W. Murnau in Germany, with the famous German actor Max Schreck playing a guy named Count Orlok, but he was essentially Dracula, and most of the story with modifications was stolen from Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. Stoker's widow sued over copyright violation, and a court ruled that every copy of the film, a classic film, it's a beautiful silent film, every copy was supposed to be destroyed, but a couple of prints survived, and so we still have it, and it's been reprinted and everything else. It's just beautiful. So it's remade by Robert Eggers, and kind of reimagined with Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok. I'm going to call these guys Dracula and use the names from Dracula because I can't remember the names. Nicholas Hoult is in it, and Lily Rose Depp plays, who would be Minna Harker from Dracula. She's the heroine. And Eggers, you probably know, he made The Witch, which I really liked, a really, really interesting film using mostly dialogue from the Puritan era, kind of one of a raft of very intelligent horror movies that include things like It Follows and The Babadook that were really interesting, and this was one of them. He made The Lighthouse, which was beautiful to look at, but I found it unbearably pretentious and boring. I felt like I was trapped on the lighthouse with those guys. Beautifully filmed, beautifully acted, but just really pretentious. And pretentious, somebody once said nothing dates like modernism. And I think that that's one of the problems with those films. They get big critical raves, but people don't want to watch them again because they're just excruciating. The Northman, which I don't even remember, that was kind of the Hamlet story reimagined from its original legendary source. And I remember liking it, but feeling it was flawed. It didn't do too well. But this film is a big hit. It is spectacularly beautiful. It's the most beautiful film I have seen in years. In fact, I cannot think of the last time I sat there and watched every frame, just choking at how beautiful it was. And the first 2/3 of the picture I liked, gorgeous beyond belief. Every frame, it's just a joy to look at it. It has things I don't like, some boo scares. He thinks that's part of Eggers thinks that's part of the tradition of horror. I could do without him. And the Orlok, the Dracula character, is a little too much modeled on the Coppola version with Gary Oldman, which I didn't like at all, but Eggers did like it. But where this beauty comes from is from the original, which was an expression of what's called German Expressionism. But German Expressionism is really a modernization of German romantic art. And German romantic art is an expression of Gothic storytelling. So Dracula and all of this German Expressionism and Gothic art and all this, you can see it in the old Universal pictures of Frankenstein, because a lot of those directors came over from Germany. Dracula, those had this kind of same look, but Eggers does it at a much, much bigger level. It's just absolutely beautiful. But the Gothic storytelling is an 18th century Romantic era development, and it's named after the Gothic architecture of the high Middle Ages, let's say. So a lot of the stories would take place in Gothic castles and Gothic churches and all this stuff. And my theory, which I've written about a long time ago, is that, the 18th century was an age of revolution. And it was the age when faith started to fall away and science started to rise, and all the forms were killed, the priests were killed in the French Revolution, and people started to break away from the church and all this. And Gothic fiction was both a turn back, a kind of nostalgic wish to restore the wholeness of Catholic belief. At the same time, it was suspicious of the wholeness of Catholic belief because the castles are crumbling and they're scary, and a lot of the villains are monks and evil priests and things like that. And a lot of times the Catholics show up as the evil. So the German Expressionism, Gothic art, is an expression of a nostalgia for faith, but also a fear of faith. And that is where Egger is as a storyteller. I don't know anything about his personal life or his personal beliefs, but that's his problem as a storyteller. If you look at The Witch, the religion is all close-minded and censorious and oppressive, but without it, there's evil. So he believes in evil, but I remember I did a show on horror before where I said horror now is about evil, but it has no good in it, so the stories don't make sense. 2/3 through this movie, which I was just enjoying immensely, I suddenly realized it was about to go off the rails. I realized it was going, the ending was, he was not going to stick the landing, as we say. He was not going to make the ending work. And the reason I knew this was because of the absence of God, not in terms of Egger's faith, that's none of my business and it's nobody's business, but in terms of the characters and where God would have been and faith would have been in those characters' life. It takes place in the 19th century in Germany, and where God would have been in those lives. Now, Eggers did a really smart thing. He put the Minna character, the Depp character, at the center of the story. And it begins with her crying out as a young girl, a virginal girl, crying out essentially to be to death by this Count Orlok. She doesn't know who he is. She thinks he's some kind of angel, but she's crying out for this. But even her yearning for this angelic figure is also a yearning for this violent sexuality. So the dark side of female sexuality is inside her, and Eggers talked about this in an interview. This is cut 11.
She has a deep understanding, an innate understanding of something she doesn't have language for, and no one else can relate to it. Her husband, who loves her, is dismissive of her. She's misdiagnosed as hysteric and melancholic and all these things, and you literally see her physically grappling with all this stuff. And the one person who who is able to share in this understanding of the dark side of the world is unfortunately this demon lover, this vampire who's not a nice person.
So in other words, the evil spirit, the demon lover, is the only one who can understand her yearning for the demon lover. Unfortunately, he is the demon lover. That's a very insightful, I think, take on what's happening in the story. And because she's a woman in the 19th century, living in rationalist times. Remember, the 19th century was a very scientific, rationalist time. No one believes her except Willem Dafoe, who plays the Van Helsing character. He plays the odd doctor. And listen carefully to what Dafoe says to all the unbelieving men around this suffering woman who senses this vampire is coming. This is what Dafoe says, cut 9.
I have seen things in this world that would have made Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb. We have not become so much enlightened as we have been blinded by the gaseous light of science. I have wrestled with the devil as Jacob wrestled the angel in Penuel, and I tell you, if we are to tame darkness, we must first face that it exists. Meine Herren, we are here encountering the undead plague carrier, the vampire. Nosferatu.
So a great speech, absolutely where we are as a society. It's not so much that we don't believe, it's that we can no longer see. Science has elevated reason above its station. Reason is a wonderful tool. Reason helps us understand the material world, but it doesn't show us the world whole. It doesn't show us what I was talking about before, that knowledge that we have. What is a woman? We can't say it out loud, but we know what it is. We know what it's supposed to be. We know what a man is supposed to be. It doesn't have to be John Wayne. It doesn't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. We simply know that a certain amount of character and courage and integrity goes into being a man. A certain amount of tenderness, generosity, and sacrifice goes into being a woman. Those words don't really describe it, but we understand it inside, just like we understand the difference between good and evil until, because we have no words for it, we allow ourselves to be talked out of it. We can't see anymore because we are all operating on one side of our brain, the left side, I believe, of our brain, the rationalist side of our brain, but we've lost the whole image of humanity. And that's what he's talking about there. And it's brilliant. Now, Eggers prides himself on not imposing modern ideas on stories from the past. In other words, feminism. He's very, very well aware that he's operating in a place where the feminists will rip him to pieces and have ripped him to pieces a little bit in this movie for anything that doesn't fit their modern view of what a woman should be like and would have been like. You have to rewrite everything to fulfill the modern feminist view. And he knows this. He was in an interview where the interviewer said to him, between The Lighthouse and The Witch, you're clearly drawn to the dark, the creepy, the old, the unsettling. What about ancient legends gets under your skin? And this is what Eggers says. He says, this sounds super uber precious, but I think it's hard to do this kind of creative work in a modern secular society because it becomes all about your ego and yourself. And I'm envious. I'm envious of medieval craftsmen who are doing the work for God. And that becomes a way you get to be creative, to celebrate something else. And also you're censoring yourself because it's not about like me. So you say, oh, I got to rein that back because that's not what this altarpiece needs to be, right? If you're an artist, any worldview where everything around them is full of meaning is exciting to me because we live in such a tiresome, lame, commercial culture now. What he wants to write about this woman's belief in God because that's the only way the end of the movie makes sense. I won't give it away, but the end of the movie does not make sense unless this woman, who would have been probably a Lutheran Christian in this German play, she's obviously fighting Orlok, the vampire, because of her faith. And I'm not saying that Eggers needs to believe, and I'm not saying that God needs to win. I'm not saying that, we have to see that God is triumphant and everything is great. Not at all. It simply has to make sense. Stories have to make sense, and the story doesn't make sense without her believing in God. I'm talking about storytelling and why so many stories are so flat and so bad, and this one the ending just goes off the rail entirely. And suddenly Willem Dafoe's character makes no sense. He's dancing around like a crazy man for no reason. Suddenly we don't know why anybody's doing anything. It's flat. It's emotionally flat. What should have been an incredibly inspiring and horrifying last moment is not particularly. It's just emotionally flat. After this beautiful, beautiful film, it goes awry, not because Eggers doesn't believe in God, but because he wouldn't let his character believe in God. God has been, by cultural fiat, removed from the picture. And that is the problem we have right now. That is true for all of us. When we embrace Andrew Tate, when we call for mothers to be sent into battle, when we denigrate the female and male natures we're all born with and all born to love and embrace and all born to bring together into one flesh, when we do all those things, we've allowed ourselves to be reasoned away from the truth, to be reasoned out of the things we inherently know. And you might say, well, yes, but some of the things we inherently know are wrong. Like we might think it's right to keep slaves, or we might think it's right to be a bigot. Yes, but the very fact that you can get things wrong means you can get them right. And reason is not always the guide to do it. That is why all of the rules that the Pharisees throw at Jesus, he throws back with the simple knowledge of good and evil. And that is why when you have people, these Jew haters yelling, oh, Christ is king, they know nothing of Christ because all they know is the rules that make them feel strong when they should really feel sinful and humbled. I'm not preaching to you. I'm talking about things making sense. I'm talking about how even a talented and self-searching artist like Eggers, and I love him, I hope to see more from him. I thought this picture, I was glad I went to see it. It was, like I said, it was an hour and 40 minutes of some of the most beautiful filmmaking I've ever seen. But he can't see what his subject is, even if he wants to reject it. Even if he wants to reject it, if you want to say you don't believe in God, you have to know who God is. But God has been silenced in our culture, and with that silence, the rest of us have no pathway to the truth. And that's the situation we are as this new day begins, this new administration begins, and I hope a new era for America begins. All right, Mondays, the big day. The Daily Wire will be live from Washington, D.C. to bring you every moment as Donald J. Trump is sworn in as the 47th president of the United States. We're not just covering history, we're delivering it straight to you, live and uncensored. And because 47 is the magic number, we're celebrating with 47% off new Daily Wire Plus annual memberships. And we're tossing in a free $20 gift for joining the fight. With Daily Wire Plus, you get all our shows uncensored and ad-free, along with unlimited access to exclusive movies, documentaries, and series that are literally reshaping the culture. Don't miss this. Use code 47 at dailywire.com/subscribe for 47% off your new membership today. All right, Klavan Klapbacks. Yeah, it's like Nosferatu, love never dies. All right, Klavan Klapbacks, if you would like to write in and tell us about your life, the show, politics, whatever you want to talk about, we will try and get it on. It's Klavan Klapbacks, both with a K, Klavan with a K, Klapbacks with a K at dailywire.com. Don't forget there are no E's in Klavan. It's Klavan, Klapbacks with a K at dailywire.com. The first one is from Aaron, who says, today was the first time I've listened to your show. I was talking, I guess, about last week. I was glad to hear your humor, precision of thought, and insights into different things. It was refreshing, and I learned a few things. You then read a clapback from a guy who was feeling he couldn't be fully himself and fulfilled because he wasn't married and had no children. For you to tell the guy that the center of humanity and our greatest purpose in life is to marry and have kids, man, I was just about yelling at my speakers. I challenge you to correct that idea and put forward that our greatest calling, goal, purpose, and fulfillment is found not in finding the person God intended you to marry and having children. Instead, it is having eyes only for Christ. Okay, I really want to respond to this because if I step back in a general way, of course I agree that the center of life is God and finding the image of God within yourself, and making sure that your life lives out that image, because that will give you joy. It will give you whatever success you're going to have. It will make you the full person. Absolutely, we agree. However, if somebody wrote to me and said, I have a poker game and I feel bad because whenever I play this poker game, I lose. What should I know? And I said, the most important thing in a poker game is to keep a straight face. And you wrote back to me and you said, no, the most important thing is Christ. Well, I would say yes, but in a poker game, the most important thing is to keep a straight face. So obviously in that situation, I was talking about physical life. And I do think the center of physical life is your relationship with a person of the opposite sex that produces new life. That is what your body is here for. I understand that we're not just your body, but that's what I was talking about. And the only reason I wanted to bring this up, because basically we agree, but I think we need to just be a little, I've noticed, I was talking to my son about this the other day, that whenever you mention anything of a religious nature or anything that can be of a religious nature, religious people jump down your throat with their theology. And one of the things that I'm here to tell you is we should all be a little less certain about our theology. I believe in orthodoxy, but I believe that orthodoxy is a way of giving us a picture of the invisible world, and none of us knows what that invisible world is exactly because it's invisible. And even the things that people say that they garner from Scripture are still deductions that we're making that could be wrong. This is the reason I'm not a Catholic, because I don't believe anybody is infallible, right? I don't think anybody's infallible. I don't care where he comes from, how inspired he is. It doesn't mean that nobody's right. It just means that you have to think things through, and you should always be a little bit uncertain and a little bit merciful. From Kim, I need you to settle a literary dispute between my husband and me. My husband says that The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie is one of the best fiction books ever written. I disagree, and I despise the book so vehemently. I've attempted to read it twice now and failed. Whose side do you take? Thank you for being one of the best public voices of reason and sanity. You mentioned in a podcast episode that when you find God, he will send you angels to guide you. You have been one of those angels. That's a lovely thing to say. Thank you, Kim. It's just P.S. If you haven't read the book, The Blade Itself, it's fine with me if you lie and say you didn't side with me. God won't judge you too harshly for that one. First of all, you should always, concede your husband's point. That is, that's in the Bible. You should always concede. Just say, yes, dear, The Blade Itself. The Blade Itself, the reason I took this question is I haven't read The Blade Itself, but I'm planning to this year. It is on my reading list for this year. So I will get back to you. I'm very interested to read it. I like fantasy, but most of it doesn't work for me. And funnily enough, the minute I find a funny name, I find it really hard to continue reading it. But still, I will read it, and I will get back and tell you. But meantime, agree with your husband. That's your job. You have to. Isn't that, what is that? Ephesians somewhere. It's somewhere in the Bible. I know it. Maybe I wrote it in. Maybe I agree with your husband. I was hoping my wife would find it, pick up the Bible, and find where I wrote that in. All right, it's time. First of all, it's time to become a member, because in a moment, you're going to be plunged into a darkness so complete that I can't even begin to describe it, because even words are sucked in like into a black hole. We call that Klavanlessness, and it's coming your way unless you're a member. So become a member today. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code Klavan at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. If you are a member already, you are free from Klavanlessness. It's wonderful. Fly free, my friends, and come to Member Block.